came to SHOT Show 2016 in Las Vegas, Nevada, where I asked people this question. What is your favorite childhood memory of being in the outdoors?
At Boy Scout camp.
I was in a Boy Scout troop of about 12 kids.
I grew up in a very active Boy Scout program in New Zealand.
When I was a Boy Scout, that's where it all started for me.
And we had an awesome 5th grade teacher named Mr. Ricketts. If Mr. Ricketts is still out there, I love you, man. I wouldn't say everything I've learned about the outdoors, but a lot of stuff that I've learned about the outdoors was from scouting and that good gentleman, Mr. Ricketts, who gave up his time so us little band of kids could learn stuff.
Scouting activities with friends that I grew up with, and going out into the mountains in New Zealand and learning how to survive out in the bush. Getting to ride horses up in the mountains too, that was a lot of fun.
I grew up in the city of Pittsburgh in a postage stamp lot, and I was exposed to the outdoors in Boy Scout. My dad was a scoutmaster. The Boy Scouts were awesome, at least for me, and it all started right there.
And that year was particularly cold that summer up in the mountains, and the lake froze over. And so the instructor said that he would give us the snorkeling badge even though we weren't going to do the final day. And we refused and said, no, we're doing this. So we actually broke a hole through the lake and got in there and finished our snorkeling badge. And everybody was like, oh my goodness, you guys are crazy. And we're like, yeah, we're Boy Scouts, we're doing it the right way.
My dad would take us out, us boys out.
I grew up camping a lot with my father.
The time I spent with my dad in the outdoors.
And we would go either hunting or fishing. Share meal times together, walk out in the woods or out in the fields, depending on what we were doing. Just being out there with my dad was probably, the most important thing to me.
Waking up in a tent, you're in your little mummy bag, nice and warm, and there was these things dropping on the tent. And I'm like, Dad, what is that? And we look outside, these little inchworms all over the place. And everybody in the camp's freaking out. I'm just laughing my butt off. Bugs all over. I mean, I'm talking like 100,000 of them everywhere.
When I was about 6 years old, we were looking for cows up on the Continental Divide in southwest Montana. We'd stumbled upon this old homestead and got to searching around, and we found an old sewing machine stand and a couple other things, but we didn't want to pack it off the mountain that day on our horses. So Dad said, well son, we'll come back someday with some pack horses and find this stuff. So every year for years, we'd always talk about going and doing it, but we never did. Fast forward 21 years, and I was guiding hunters in that same area, and I just happened to walk into this homestead area. Everything kind of looked familiar, and I just started getting some deja vu going on, and I remember hiding it behind a double trunk tree. I found the tree and started digging. There was nothing on top. Started digging, and I found these sewing machine stands. And I stopped for a second, and I looked at them, I took a couple pictures, and I hit them again because I want to go back with my dad and now my son, who's 7. So,
What is your favorite childhood memory of being in the outdoors?
Probably my favorite childhood memory being in the outdoors, sitting underneath the squirrel tree at my uncle's house in Kentucky, just watching the sun come up and wait for those squirrels to come down them hickory trees so we could get us some squirrel, red-eyed gravy.
So I actually grew up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, lived in a school bus. I was one of those little hippie mountain kids.
And one of my favorite things to do was to peel out after school and go jump over the bluff and walk down along the Latah Creek.
So every day we would just run out into the woods.
So my whole childhood was spent in the woods. I was one of those kids that actually walked 5 miles to the school bus. I had a mini bike at one time that I got to ride, but it was a bicycle, feet, or catching a ride with some mountain people. So I really enjoyed the outdoors, did everything as a child in the outdoors, and it was pretty much my life back then.
My buddy and I would take our BB guns or maybe nothing and just go out and walk around and see what we could find. Quite often you scare up a snake or a hawk or whatever, but the opportunity to be out and be alone and be away was very refreshing and exhilarating.
And we would make forts, and we'd break down branches, and we'd tunnel down into the and make underground tunnels and stuff. So I had a great time with just some shovels that I stole from my dad, which he found out about later when I bent them.
I think my first favorite memory of being in the outdoors was getting my first firearm, which was a 10-22 rifle. It was given to me by my stepfather.
We used to take fishing trips up in Canada every year.
I grew up in the coal region of Pennsylvania, and my neighborhood was up on a mountain.
And I remember very vividly him having an emphasis on accuracy, and he had put a dime in the tree bark of a tree, and we'd walk off 20 yards or 30 yards, and he'd make me shoot that dime off the tree. And from there it just kind of grew. I was outside of that experience. Most people in my family weren't gun people. I was kind of that outlier, and from there it just kind of grew into what it is today, which, as you guys may know, is kind of a crazy thing, but I love it to death.
We would stay on an island, and that by far is the most memorable time. It was just beautiful. The whole forest was white birch, and we'd have to boat out all of our gear and equipment, and stay on this island and go fishing for northern pike. And it was I started doing that when I was 9. It was awesome.
And every mountain where I grew up was mined previously, so they had roads going all around, and these were not strip mines. These were bored in the ground, and people using pickaxes and all that kind of stuff, and then they'd close down, but all the roads were still out there. And so everything that I did as a kid was out in the woods, playing around coal banks, playing around coal mines, things that scare me to death as a father now that we did as kids, and our parents had no idea what we were doing. And that started my love for the outdoors, because I didn't know differently. We did not play inside where I grew up. And then I became a Boy Scout and just started camping, and then eventually I'm a late hunter. By the time I was 22, I finally decided I want to hunt. And so it just snowballed from there, and I've just always been somebody drawn to the outside, drawn to mountains, drawn to trees and stuff.
It was about 35 degrees, kind of a rain, snow, slush mix. I'd been hiking all day long. I was probably 9 years old, and I wasn't happy.